Oh, this is what I need against the cold. Hello, my name is Leonie and welcome back to my channel. Oh, my cold hands, they're too cold to even bear the heat of the tea. Today we are going to be discussing a bunch of books that I recently read. Oh, it's so cold. I'm gonna sit under a blanket. Yeah, now we're cozy. Oh, that's immediately better. Oh, I actually really love life right now. Before I start talking about books, I thought it would be fun to kind of give you a little like update about how I'm doing, I guess. Just my life, little life update. I feel like I appeared in front of you guys with red hair at some point with no like explanation. So I thought I would explain the hair. An explanation is needed because this was not really the plan. I planned on dyeing my hair like kind of a reddish brown, which it is right now. But when I just came back from the hairdressers, it was like bright red, like crazy bright red. And usually when I go to a hairdresser, I am used to them using non-permanent or maybe like semi-permanent hair dye, and it usually, in my experience, washes out in like 3 weeks. But this just stuck around. It did wash out a little in the sense that it's very subdued right now, and I actually do like the color, but as you can see, it's not my natural hair color and it's just not going away. Apparently they did do like a permanent thing. I don't know. This has never happened to me before. And now I'm stuck with the red hair. But I'm not mad about it because it's a nice color. It's just unexpected for both me and you. Little moving update. I've lived in this apartment for half a year now, which is crazy how fast that goes. I started making the move-in vlogs when I moved, but I kind of stopped making them because I was so tired and also overwhelmed all the time, to be honest, and I'm finally getting back into things, I feel like. I never talked about it on this channel, I think. I have been writing myself as well for about a year now. I've joined a writing group and we get together every 2 weeks and share a writing with each other and give each other tips, and that has been so much fun. I've been writing a bunch of short stories because you guys know I love short stories. One of my short stories even became a finalist for a writing contest, which was honestly so cool, and I'm so grateful for that. And that was kind of like a little bit of like confidence push that I really needed. You can't read it because it is in Dutch, but I did recently finish a short story in English that I actually can share with you and that you can read. More on how in a second, but I really wanted to write, I guess, an adult fairy tale, in the sense like a fairy tale often has, you know, a moral of the story, a little message that is really nice for children to hear. So I was playing with this idea of like an adult fairy tale with a message that would have been nice for me to hear as an adult or as a teenager. And I also really love writing kind of mythical stories. So I ended up writing this story called The Midnight Visitor, about the personification of midnight and how he roams the lands and takes care of the sleeping people every night. And I'm really excited to share this story with you because it is getting published on a platform that is also the sponsor of today's video, Lore Library. They are an online short story platform that just launched with the help of a bunch of booktubers, because they have an amazing lineup of booktubers that all wrote a short story for the platform. For example, I just finished The Hotel for Hungry Ghosts by Christy Ann Jones, which was such a beautiful and bittersweet story. I highly recommend you read that one. And I also cannot wait to read all the other short stories by the other booktubers. But if you sign up to Lore Library, not only can you read my short story, but you also gain access to all of the short stories on their platform. And if you prefer audiobooks, there's also some narrated versions. Like I also narrated The Midnight Visitor myself, so you can listen to me read it to you. And what I find really important is that Lore Library really has the best interest of their writers in mind. So there's absolutely no AI involved. Every single story gets a beautiful cover and little illustrations to just make it that little bit more magical. And if you get a membership, you are directly supporting the writers and artists that make everything on the Lore Library platform, which I think is super important. So if you're interested in reading my short story, The Midnight Visitor, and gain access to all of the other short stories by other amazing creators, you can click the link in my description and sign up to Lore Library now. I think it's so cool. Oh, I'm also a little scared to share it with you, but I can't wait to hear you guys' thoughts. Now let's stop talking about me and talk about the books that I read. It's been 2 months since I made a wrap up, and I haven't really read that much since, because I've been reading super slowly, really, you know, savoring every single book. I read Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. This is what you would call a cozy witchy fantasy about this small town where a witchy girl has a bookshop, and she gets this letter from the witches in her area telling her that if she doesn't go through these like witch trials, she will lose her powers. And she has never really used her powers, so immediately she's like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna get through these trials if I don't even really know how to use my magic? How can I even prove that I should keep my magic? It's not like super like cozy fantasy, nothing's happening. There's quite a lot happening in the sense that, you know, there are these trials and there are like betrayals and mysteries of like evil wizards and witches. So it actually is quite up-tempo compared to other cozy fantasies, but nevertheless I would call this a cozy fantasy given like the amount of focus that is given on like the bookshop of it all, the witchy small town vibes of it all. I'm like sad to say that this book just didn't really do much for me, but I also have a hard time telling you why exactly. And I think I just need to accept that cozy fantasy just isn't for me. Like maybe I just keep reading this popular genre, but it's just not for me. It's just very typical. So all the things that I found really typical might be reasons for you to read the book. Like these might be reasons why you would like this book, but it just has this like very typical like, oh, the main character has their own little shop and they're very shy, and then they have a very eccentric best friend, and there's like a cat, a mischievous cat character. There's a mother that is also a witchy teacher. There's like a broody warlock love interest and a little romance plotline. Like all things that are fun, but just it didn't tickle my brain in any way. I don't know why I decided to use that wording, but as in I was reading this book and I just felt like I'd read it a million times before, and not in a comforting way, but just in a I cannot keep my attention on this, because nothing about this book is like making me interested or making me feel like, ooh, this is different or something new or makes me think about something or whatever. It was just very, very generic. I will say there are things that I liked. I think this was super well written. Out of, you know, all the cozy fantasy books that I've read, I think Lucy Jane Wood has a really clear, nice writing style. Everything that happens in this book is well executed. There are some genuinely really profound moments of character development. A big theme here is a main character that has to learn to take up space and, you know, be more of herself and accept herself more, which are themes that I normally really like, and it was well executed. It was just surrounded by kind of generic other things. So I think my verdict on Rewitched is that if you like cozy fantasy and you don't mind seeing the same tropes being used again and again, because I know that for a lot of cozy fantasy readers that is also the comfort of it, then I think you might like this. I think it was very well executed for what it was. It just wasn't for me. I think I just shouldn't be reading cozy fantasy. I think the only cozy fantasy that I should be reading is more of the Emily Wilde books. Then I read this little novella called Thornhedge by T Kingfisher. T Kingfisher I really want to read more of because just the way that she writes is what I would describe as like adult fairy tales. I also think it's a little Neil Gaiman-esque, which after everything that we now know about Neil Gaiman, I'm like so just disappointed. I feel like Neil Gaiman really created this type of writing style, this type of fantasy that is like a little quirky, a little fairy tale-esque, but still for adults with a little bit of a dark tinge, but not in like a Game of Thrones way, but more in a, well, Neil Gaiman way. And I think that instead of describing authors as Neil Gaiman-esque, we need to start describing them as T Kingfisher-esque. Because T Kingfisher does this too. Everything that she writes has this dark, mature fairy tale vibe to it, with really quirky, memorable characters that feel like they are plucked straight out of a fairy tale. This particular story, Thornhedge, is a reimagining of Sleeping Beauty. That's the one. It specifically says there's a princess trapped in a tower, like in Sleeping Beauty. This isn't her story, but it's actually about this cute little girl named Toadling who lives like around this tower in like the brambles. There are fairies of the variety evil, like cruel prince type fairies, which I like. There's a very strong focus on family, found family. Our main character, Toadling, is a human, but she has been raised by fairies, and that kind of made her a little quirky. It also made it so that she can turn into a toad, like an actual toad, which I love that we have a main character that can turn into a toad, okay? Sarah J Maas would never write that. There is a super wholesome knight character that starts a friendship with Toadling, and his whole thing is that he's like a knight, but he's not very good at killing, and he keeps saying sorry to everyone. It's so cute. I totally understand why this won the Hugo Award, and I think also the Nebula Award for Best Novella. It won a bunch of fantasy awards, and I see why. But despite all these positive things that I have to say about it, I still gave it just like, you know, a decent 3 stars, because it took me forever to get through this. Like, it's only 120 pages and it took me weeks. It took me weeks. Nothing really made me feel like, ooh, I want to keep reading. And that's what I usually have with T Kingfisher, is I am like engaging with her stories as if they are a beautiful painting. You know, I'm just admiring them for how beautiful and good and well crafted they are. But I'm not sucked into it. You know, the paintings never turn into portals to different worlds for me. They just remain paintings that I'm admiring for their craft. That was a beautiful metaphor. Wow. Go you, Leonie. But yeah, I do really think that this book lacked a certain kind of mystery or intrigue. Speaking of being sucked into books, the next book I read actually like was the first time in a very long time that I was like, oh my gosh, I want to read this book all the time. It still took me an entire month to finish, even though I wanted to read it all the time, which I guess just shows that I just haven't really had a lot of time to read lately, which maybe that's why I don't have so many books to share today. But I was so excited about this book. This is the kind of book that made me go to all of my friends and be like, oh my gosh, this book that I'm reading right now, please read it. I want to talk about it with someone. And that book is Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. M.L. Wang is an indie author, mostly known for The Sword of Kaigen, which I haven't read, but I do want to now. But I think this book has now also been traditionally published. It's a standalone high fantasy with an insanely high rating on Goodreads, like a 4.4 average rating, and it is totally understandable. Before I tell you what it's about, I just want to let you know that this is one of those books where you just read the opening chapter and you're just immediately into it. Like, I was reading the first chapter and I was already like sitting at my breakfast table, just head in hands, like, holy shit, oh my gosh, what is happening? And that is just the first chapter. That's amazing. Okay, let me tell you what this book is about. We are following a girl named Fiona. She is like the first woman to become high mage, because this world is super sexist and everyone thinks that women are not made to do magic because they're too emotional. But our main character is definitely not a passive main character. She has a huge ego, a huge drive, and is really, really good at magic. So she is like determined to become high mage and just, you know, deal with all these annoying men and show them how good she is with magic. It's really nice to read a story with a main character that is this clearly flawed, but also kind of admirable. Someone in my Patreon described her as really intelligent, but also very stupid. That is the best description of her. Like, really smart, but constantly does really stupid things regarding like personal interaction. But that made her such an interesting character that very, very much influenced the plot. Like, we are not talking here about one of those books with a passive main character. None of that here. And another really cool thing about this book is the magic system. It is a magic system where they have to write spells on typewriters, and the way they do that is almost like coding, like programming, where they have to siphon energy from somewhere, point a certain target and a certain action, and based on that the magic happens. And part of the joy of reading this book was just learning how this world works, learning how the magic works. And then the plot of the book is really just Fiona becomes high mage and gets appointed like a janitor of lower standing as her assistant, and they have a lot of conversations. Which sounds really boring, but trust me, it's not. It's really about their interactions with each other and how this janitor influences Fiona's view of the world, and how she is slowly learning more and more secrets about the magic and about the other high mages and about the society that she lives in. And that is the power of this book. That is what makes this book so incredible, is that this entire book deals so well with societal themes of oppression, racism, colonialism, extraction of resources, like environmentalism, xenophobia. You can interpret this book in so many different ways because it's just an exploration of power dynamics and of resource extraction. And this is done exceptionally well. It is about how people close their eyes to the truth. It's how people close their eyes to oppressive systems and why they do that and how they justify it to themselves. This is one of those books where you could talk about it with someone forever and ever and ever and have wonderful discussions about it. That being said, there were some things that I didn't like about this book. The first one is that this is just another one of those books where I just think that the message is like really thickly laid on. Like, it's extremely on the nose, extremely in your face. Maybe it needed to be, because sometimes people miss the point, but I do prefer it if the message is a little bit more subtle. And I also hated the romance in this book. There's barely any romance, but like the little tiny little bit that was there shouldn't have been there, in my opinion. It felt so forced, and I feel like this book just shouldn't have romance at all. So I give this book like 4.5 stars. I already know this is going to end up on my top 10 of the year. I had an amazing time. I will say, if you are looking for like plot heavy epic fantasy, this is not it. Like I said, a lot of it is more about ideas and characters having conversations with each other. So just know that when you're getting into it. Also, if you need your female main characters to be likable, you're gonna have a hard time here as well. But I liked that she wasn't likable. It was necessary for the story, trust me. So yeah, I definitely will be reading The Sword of Kaigen as well. The next book I finished was just a warm hug of a book, and that is A Prayer for the Crowned Shy by Becky Chambers. This is the second book in the duology after A Psalm for the Wild-Built, so I guess I can now review the duology. I love, by the way, just wanted to say, thin little hardbacks. Ooh, amazing. I love a thin hardback. Big chunky hardbacks, don't like them. Nuisance, hard to handle. Novellas as hardbacks, there's something so, I don't know, there's something so crisp and nice about them. Please tell me I'm not the only one that experiences this. This entire series is such a warm hug. It is about a world where robots just were like, bye to society. We're gonna live out in the forest, have fun without us. And we follow a tea monk who travels around giving people tea, and he goes into the wilderness and he meets one of these like wildling robots, and they start traveling together and having all of these conversations with each other because they both have quite a different view of the world because, you know, one of them is a robot. And it really is like an exploration of like, what does humanity need? How can humanity be kind? How can we be kind to each other? I would describe this entire duology as like an exploration of how can we be softer to ourselves and to the people around us. The second book, it didn't wow me as much as the first book. And I know that because I started underlining passages that I really liked or that really resonated with me, and I did that a little bit less in the second book. But still, I still gave it 4 stars because it was so wholesome. What were some parts that I underlined? There's a part where the monk explains the money system to the robot, and in this sci-fi world there's this very kind of communal money system without money. So it's not a money system actually, but it's a system where everyone helps each other based on what they can give. So like the farmer feeds the musician, and then the musician brings music to the village, and so forth and so forth. There's another quote that I really liked because this monk character, they're very hard on themselves, and then the robot says to them, you don't have to have a reason to be tired. You don't have to earn rest or comfort. You're allowed to just be. And then the monk tells the robot, I feel like that's true for everyone else, but not for me though. And I found that very relatable. So yeah, the second book is like a perfect extension of the first book if you really like the first book, and where it's like, I wish I could read another book that was basically the first book again, but different. It's the second book. And I just generally recommend this book to everyone who feels a little lost, a little overwhelmed by the harshness of our current world, by all the individuality of our current world, and just wants to slow down and have a cup of tea. You should read this duology, and they're both novellas, so super easy and quick to get through. And then the final book that I just wanted to give a quick review is one that I would almost forget about. It's a book that I bought at the beginning of last year and have been going throughout the year, and now that it's been a year, I feel like I should kind of review it for you guys. And it is called The Wheel of the Year. This is a beautiful non-fiction book about like living with the seasons and all the pagan holidays. Now, I'm not pagan or Wiccan or witchy, or I don't even know the correct term, so apologies for that. But I do really like this idea of, I guess, emphasizing the changing of the seasons and noticing the changing of the seasons. And I'm also really interested in the folklore around it. And this is just a beautifully illustrated book about all the celebrations of the year. Like, you may be aware with midwinter and midsummer, but there is also a spring equinox and an autumn equinox, and then more in between there as well. The reason I bought this is because I love the illustrator Jessica Rue, and this book is just full of beautiful illustrations, little things to notice, little rituals that you can do if that's what you want to do, animals and plants to notice at different times of the year, recipes. Isn't this just beautiful? Ah, I just want to look at it. It is, and I noticed this while reading it, technically for children. But in my experience, non-fiction books for children have the prettiest illustrations. And my personal favorite parts were the ones where they talk about the folklore behind each celebration. This is when I noticed this was for children. It started with like a "let's be safe" page. Please keep a trusted adult if you're going to light a candle. I never keep a trusted adult around when I light my candles. And no, I do not count myself as a trusted adult. I don't think anyone should. So yeah, it's been a year and I've gone through all of the celebrations, and I'm gonna go through them again this year as well. And I'm definitely gonna be just rereading it this year as well. I would recommend this if you are also interested in like living with the seasons. If you're looking for something really in-depth, this is not it. Again, it is for children. And it is very focused on like magic and rituals, which isn't what I'm looking for, but I still found it interesting to learn about. And again, you just have a beautiful book. It's just gorgeous. I love having these kind of coffee table books. And now for the last part of this video, let's pick out some new books to read. I'm gonna go on a little island holiday with some of my friends because we are all like sick and tired of the lack of sun here in the Netherlands. So we're going to like a warm island. And of course, I want to bring some books. So I thought it would be fun to kind of choose some books to bring together. My beautiful bookshelves. Let's first return the books that I've read to the shelves. I love putting back a book on the shelf once I finished it. It's so satisfying. Gosh, that was not satisfying. There we go. Okay, so the book that I'm currently reading is Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands. This is part 2 of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I loved last year. So I want to finish this one. And I also just got a copy of the 3rd book in the trilogy. So I'm very tempted to just take both of these books with me, but I have extremely limited luggage space, and taking, well, they're not that big, but like the choice here is, do I take these 2 books or do I just take my Kindle? You know, do I just take my Kindle? It does save space. I kind of just want to binge read this series. So I might just take my Kindle. I still have the ebook for The Bone Shard Daughter, which I still need to finish. I am really in like a high fantasy phase right now, so this could be a good one because I have the ebook of this. I might get the ebook for The Safekeep by Elle van der Wouden because we're reading that one with my Patreon book club. This was nominated for the Booker Prize last year, and it is a Dutch author, which I think is really fun. And it's been a while since I read literary fiction, so it might be a fun way to switch it up. But these books, they're calling to me. I'll probably make a decision once I've packed my bags based on how much space I still have left. Knowing me, I'm probably gonna end up going with the e-reader. Okay, anyway, let me know what your favorite book was that you read in the past month or months or so. I'm gonna end this video with a special shout out to my Patreon members, especially my elite Patreon members whose names you can see here. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you soon with another video very soon. Goodbye.